Hello again. Welcome back, y'all. This is episode 1.5 of General Ed Kids Deserve Geography 2. Today is just me. Not every episode is going to be a full hour-long discussion plus lesson. Today I wanted to follow up and sort of cap out the first week sequence of teaching geography the first week of school. We learned about our PEACH last time, our political, economic, environmental, cultural, human geographies, as well as our conversation with Ms. Carey about what the hell happened to geography. So I wanted to come in and complete the sequence, if you will. So we're just going to jump right in. Some guiding questions and ideas and objectives we'll be pursuing as we go through. The basic skill set is analyzing spatial relationships and the vocabulary to do that. On the intellect level, we'll be talking about how geography influences infrastructure, both in history and in our city, which I mentioned teach in the Metro Atlanta area. We'll examine the geographies of our county. There's actually a task at the end that involves them using Google Earth to talk about where they live and how they understand their neighborhood and world. And we'll also be critical of how diffusion of ideas is disrupted and whose ideas get disrupted and what happens if your idea is disrupted or passed on, for that matter, if your idea does proliferate. So those are the questions, concepts, and ideas we're wanting them to land with at the end of all this. So I'm going to go ahead and share the screen. Let me make sure it works this time. Come on. You're going to do it. Nice. Great. Let me go ahead and make this. So on the second day of geography, when the kids walk in, they all get a piece of paper, blank white piece of paper that says the word idea in the middle. I just made a blank slide, put idea in the middle, and make 160 copies. And that is for the opening exercise. The idea here, the first directive I issue them, is they have to trade ideas with somebody else in the classroom, someone next to them. And it's just a simple handing over. You have to end up with an idea and you have to give away an idea. Pretty quick and easy. The second directive then is, all right, you need to give your idea to someone else, but they can't be someone directly next to you, but you can get up. You don't have to stay in your seat anymore. And it's usually pretty simple get up, walk, trade. They get to their friend first, right? And then they come back to their desk. Again, they just have to end up with a different idea. The third directive, though, this is where the controlled chaos starts to come out. So you got to give it to someone not directly next to you, and you cannot simply just walk over and hand it to them. There needs to be some variation, something that maybe wouldn't be usually within the rules in the classroom. To get your idea across to someone else and to acquire a new idea yourself. So depending on how rowdy you want to let them get, in the past I've had kids jumping over desks, making paper airplanes, paper balls, all that sort of stuff. And it gets pretty silly pretty quickly. And they make the exchange, and once we settle down, we reflect on the exercise. What happened? What was different about the way you had to do it that last time? Questions like, what is the state of your idea that you received now? Usually it's not as pristine as they initially had their paper with, their paper was. And how might that translate to real life? How might that translate to your ideas are a bit crumpled up or in a different shape or were delivered in maybe not the simplest way? How does the furniture represent geography itself? If I have students jumping over the desk, they're not always exactly in the exact same spot as when the class started, having to address the land in front of you to get your idea across. I've also done this exercise digitally during COVID years to varying degrees of success. Not surprisingly, not every kid received, I would have them send an email to someone else, and then they would have to forward that email to another classmate. And not everyone got an idea in return. And that's part of the lesson, too, that not every idea makes it to where it's supposed to go or was intended to go. And what does that do in a society or a place to a person or even to a relationship? That ideas don't always make it, and sometimes ideas die. I bring up the historical content of the Empire of Mali and the Library of Timbuktu. And during conflict, where do you send your soldiers to defend? And many are often, say, the wall or the front lines or a government building. But how about the library? Especially when it was so much easier to burn hard copies, so everything would be gone in an instant. That ideas are worth and need to be protected to protect that transmission and to protect that knowledge. So that's the conversation happens there. I'll go over here. And that is our opening activity. I do also ask what disciplines of geography are there. You can argue cultural, because transmission of ideas, but even environmental maybe, because of if you're moving the desks and things are being shoved around, that if it's analogous or allegory for the environment itself, could do that. Lots of different answers, right? And make sure then we land on the vocabulary here. We're building ourselves a 10-word vocabulary bank between the previous lesson and this one and the next one. And once you have 10 words, that just happens to make a great vocabulary quiz. So migration, the movement of a group of people or animals, and diffusion, the spread of ideas, disease, or technology. Clarify that what we just did was a little bit of both, really. If you want to get down to it, you could definitely make a justification for both happened in the classroom there. All right, so make sure they get those down. We want to keep it moving, though, right? We want them to still be interested and intrigued by the material at hand. So this is actually how the map is supposed to be when I opened it. I asked students, you may be familiar with this, the tabula rogerina, which is, of course, the name given to it by Europeans because they could not be bothered to learn Arabic. The actual map maker, Muhammad el-Idrisi, this was the preeminent work of maps around the world used by sailors and explorers from Europe, Asia, Africa, all over, up until I want to say the late 1300s, early 1400s. The Arabic pronunciation, I'm going to try and get this right, is Muzaha al-Mushtaq fi Iqtarak al-Afaq, which, if I recall correctly, loosely translates to the one who travels the world. And again, this was the map used. I asked students, what do you see? What parts of the world are we looking at? And give them a moment to think about it, talk about it with their friend, and then I start asking for specifics. What countries, what place would you see today in that area? What regions, what continents do you think you see? Then I make them come up to the board and circle it. All right, you think you see Africa? Where is it? If you think you see Asia, or the Middle East for that matter, where? And let them circle it. They're usually all wrong, which is pretty fun. And when they're really flustered, that's when I flip it here and come back to it like that. And the light bulbs go off. Oh, right. North Africa here, Western Europe, East Asia, all those sorts of things. And to talk about how perspective has changed over time and place. Again, this was the map used from the early, all the way up to the late 1300s, early 1400s around the world. And how, the size of Asia was seen as wildly off from what it is, where the coast here is, or how what would actually be East Africa right here is actually seen more as moving eastward. And the idea that north, south, east, west haven't always been standardized the way that we understand it today. We usually end up using the words up or down, which don't really have any bearing here in those terms. So just a bit about perspective, how perspective changes over time and place. The next two slides we do review. Ideally, they're supposed to know this by now, but sometimes things happen, right? The last couple of years have been pretty rough in the school system. Just making sure to go through each one. I pull out Google Maps or Google Earth to zoom in and out so you can see how the scale actively changing as you zoom in and out and what it is. Compass, grid, key, legend, symbols. For grid, a lot of them actually don't know that in the context of map work anyway. that link there, I don't have the ArcGIS resource open because it is very resource intensive. So I took some screenshots instead. And it takes you to the City of Atlanta's Department of City Planning, where we talk about zoning, right? What is a zone and what relevance and meaning does it have? Would you want certain types of zones in your residential neighborhood? Why don't you? Does anybody have a store in their house? And why don't we do that? And how come other places in the world do that, where the first floor of your house is actually your storefront? But how come we don't do that in residential areas? So we take a look at the grids of the City of Atlanta. And when you click on one of those grids, it actually gives you a PDF of all the zoning in that grid and the different colors. So again, another example of a key and symbols. I have them in the past. I haven't done it in a while, but I've had them do an assignment where they pick a grid and then find all the different colors, what are the different regions there, and then maybe go find a street view of that grid in Google Maps or Google Earth. I believe the image here is Georgia State University. So mixed use, residential, urban, industrial, all these different zoning types that are present there. Zoning. And then, of course, our tools, geographer's tools, the old tool, the map, the atlas, the globe. While I love outdated globes, I generally stay away from these book atlases. A lot of them are out of date. Some people love them. I'm more inclined to go with the digital assets, which we do spend a lot of time with. Satellite imagery, Google Maps, and Google Earth. At the end of this, there's actually a task. I have a Google Earth preset for almost every unit when we're introducing the physical geography of a new place. Infographics, we have some fun with that. We do make several infographics throughout the year. And GIS, Geographic Information Systems, do that by having them look at this image. And what is this image telling you? Well, what are you taking away here? And the layers are important. And to ask them, why would you want that? Why would you want demographics, be it race, class, gender, balance in a region, income levels, what's already developed there, and why would you want to use that together? What would that tell you about your neighborhood, and what could you do with that information? And let them mess around with that and get some ideas. And they usually come to a couple different conclusions that we'll talk about throughout the year. GIS. So that's the review material. That's the intro in the review material. Moving forward here, this is where we're going to land on the task. This is taking us towards an actionable task, two, in fact. And we've got our last three vocabulary words here, right? So we were building towards 10. We've got the PEACH, political, environmental, economic, cultural, and human geographies. We've got migration and diffusion now. And now we're about to add structures, relationships, and processes. So before I even get to the words, though, I just have them look at the photos. So, where is this? Most of them pick up pretty quickly. That's Atlanta. They recognize the Gold Dome, which is the Capitol building downtown, the Westin building, the Georgia Pacific building, the Delta signage, the highways. They know well enough. I do remind them that we are not truly living in the city, Atlanta, the city limits, and that you live in a semi-urban, semi-suburban outgrowth, if you will, that is adjacent to the city and impacted by the city. And some of them even have mailing addresses that say Atlanta, but harking back to the grid there that I showed earlier, we don't actually live in Atlanta, and our circumstances might be a little bit different than those who live in the heart of the city. So ask them where it's going. Some of them figure out the lanes on the left there, that is 75, 85 going south towards our airport, Hartsfield-Jackson Airport. And then I have each one student read a word. We've got structures, relationships, processes. And to explain what each one of those are. And then to take it back to the photo, can you identify each one of those words in the photo? So for structures, of course, a lot of them go for the buildings because that's what they know a structure to be. And they're not wrong. It could absolutely be a structure, a place, or a thing to analyze in terms of spatial analysis and geography. But to make sure that they're clear on the city itself could be a structure. And if a city is, what else could be? The county, your township, your neighborhood, all sorts of different things. Maybe a train station. Right? We do talk about MARTA as well, which is Atlanta's struggling, doing it the best it can public transit system. Relationships, of course, they get the highway right away. How about bike lanes? If they're going to the airport, the runways. How about sidewalks? And then, of course, the processes, what do you do on each of those things? What do you do on a bike lane? You cycle. What do you do on a plane? You fly. What do you do on the road? You drive. Hopefully, that's what you're doing in those places. And to just really clarify that, have them clarify that. And then the question to walk away with here, what are the major thoroughfares, what are the major highways through Atlanta to understand Atlanta's infrastructure? Because infrastructure is a huge part of how development occurs and both impacts geography, and geography impacts infrastructure development as well, right? It works in the inverse in that regard. And when we do gentrification and white flight, that's going to play a role in understanding that. So we're also preparing for local histories of geography. So they got to walk away. I go to the board and I draw 285. They usually get that one, which is our perimeter, right? This goes around the blob that is Atlanta and Fulton County and DeKalb County. I-20, which bisects east to west. And we've got 85, 75 that go northwest and northeast down to the south portions, respectively, and combine along the middle. And to understand how that could impact development and how places construct themselves and what relationships you have to get to different structures. I believe I also have a MARTA map in the room too. So understanding what their city looks like. And of course, as I mentioned, this was leading to a task. I'll bring up the actual task here. I gave them two 2-minute Google Earth tutorial videos, but they're going to create a Google Earth project. And that utilizes different place markers, lines, shading, shapes, all sorts of stuff to explain or really graph their world, their part of DeKalb, their part of their home, wherever that is. There is some criteria here. And some suggestions. They don't have to necessarily do all of these things, but what's your favorite restaurant could be in there? Do you want your neighborhood? Do you want a park you go to, your friend's house, your grandma's house? What's your world as you know it, and how do you get to and from those places is how we're introducing these digital assets of geography. One of the stipulations is when you draw those lines, you draw the relationships. Can't be a straight line. You can't draw where you can't walk or drive. You can't tell them you can't put it through some random person's backyard or through someone's house because that's not the path you're taking. How do you get to a place? Show me. I usually give them a week or two to do this because many students have told me it took them 40 plus minutes. It is a project, so I do value it higher. And I don't put late on this. I don't take any late points off because we're being real. Some kids are still struggling to have Wi-Fi at home at the time. Some kids, maybe their little Chromebook, they need to exchange it out for a new one. Just to be conscientious of that when we're using digital assets for producing material. I'm really all about that. A lot of this material I will have on Teacher Pay Teachers in the near future. Probably by the time this goes up, it'll be on there. And most of it will have a corresponding video that walks through the material. And the last thing I do, this is actually the vocab quiz I mentioned. It's open notes, all about that relearning as we go. Rote memorization and just be picking from multiple choice, as we all know, is not really the best, or even some people argue not even a valid method of checking how do you know what you know, or do you really know it meaningfully. And I'm big into open notes for these types of quizzes, 4 choices. It's the 5 types of geography, the peach, and the 5 words we learned in this lesson. And they just take. I have Kahoot, I have a PDF of it. I think you could find this. Best Ustaz is the handle there, and it is public. And you're welcome to change it. Some of them are Atlanta oriented, but you could probably shift it around, right? And that's where we're going. That is the first week of geography. That's how we do it. If you have any thoughts or questions, would love to hear them in the comments. Something I'm looking at my lesson plan here, something I forgot to mention earlier. When we talk about MARTA and the infrastructure of Atlanta, make sure that they know if your public transit system, A, if they know its acronym, and B, even though I worked outside the city limits, the MARTA still services a lot of their neighborhoods. It's mostly bus, but there's absolutely train service and bus service that goes outside the heart of Atlanta as well. And that they might find themselves using it someday. Remember, a lot of what we do this is big, I'm sure many of you are as well, big on authentic assessment. Take this knowledge out into the world and do something with it. And we'll find many of the tasks in this curriculum I've developed over the last 3 years includes that type of material. And that's it. That's what I think I got. Episode 1.5. Thanks for being here. And just remember, general ed kids deserve geography too, and don't forget it. Y'all have a great night.